One of the best denoising programs on the market today is DxO PureRAW 6. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey of using the software for those who may be considering picking up PureRAW 6, or for those who maybe just recently purchased it and you're wondering, how can I get the most out of this software? Now, for those of you who are looking to save a little bit of money when purchasing DxO PureRAW 6, consider using coupon code FWP Summer 26. That coupon code is valid until July 15th, 2026, and it is an affiliate coupon, which means I do make a commission from everyone who uses it, but that's at no extra cost to you. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the computer and take a look at how we can use DxO PureRAW 6. All right. So first things first, when you start off in PureRAW 6, you're going to have this screen that looks very much like this. Obviously, I have an image in here. And so if I want to remove this, I can right click and then I can clear the light box. And what that does is it removes all of the images that are inside of my workspace or my landing page. Now, the more you work inside of PureRAW 6, the more images you'll probably have in there. But nonetheless, when you open it, if you've never used it before, then it's going to look very similar to the page that's in front of you. Now, I'm going to come over here and grab a folder of images, because you could very easily just click on this plus icon and then navigate to your images. But that's really not the way that I like to work. Instead, I typically just go and grab the images that I want to put into PureRAW 6 and just start working on them there. And so I have a folder here of images that I shot in low light. And so I'm just going to grab a series of them, and I'm only grabbing raw images. I know that these were all shot with relatively high ISOs. And so this is one of those, or these are one of those images that need to be fixed. So I'm going to go ahead and click, drag, and just drop them right into DxO PureRAW 6. This is a very, very easy software to use because it's just that simple. Click, drag, and drop. And then for the reason that I think many people have gravitated towards using DxO PureRAW is that DxO has these lens modules that you can use in order to lens and camera combinations, I should say, and they're modules. They call them DxO modules. Just think of it like getting the best out of your camera sensor and your lens combined. All right. In this case, I was using my Sony A7R5 and my Sigma 24 to 70. And so all I have to do is click the little circle and highlight it with the blue accent color, and then I'll hit save. And you'll notice that I'm going to get a download. It happens really fast. So I'm going to hit save, and you can see it's done already. And so what DxO has done, or PureRAW 6 has done, is it's applied that lens camera combination correction to all of these images. But what's more important is it's going to do that for any other image that I bring in. Let me show you. So I'll just click off to deselect those, and we're going to go ahead and jump back over here to Finder. And I'm just going to grab another image. We'll grab this one right here. And when I click and drop it, notice I don't get that pop-up anymore, because DxO has already realized, like, hey, this is still the same camera, the same lens. And so I already have that module downloaded. I'm just going to apply it to the image. So that's the beauty of working like this and getting the most out of your overall photos. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what the heck DxO even does. And this is what it's all about when you're using PureRAW 6. This is about cleaning up the image. So I'm going to click on this first image here and come down to the process with preview button. And I'm just going to click there. Now, on the left side here is the part of the image that is unprocessed, has all of the raw data and the noise in it. And the right side is going to be the portion that is processed. Now, I'm going to zoom in so that way it can be seen on the YouTube compression how much this is actually cleaning up the file. And so if you look over here on the left side, you can see there's all kinds of color noise inside of this image. And then on the right side, it's just gone. It doesn't exist. It doesn't even exist in the image. And so to me, that is really, really awesome. Now, of course, you're probably wondering, like, well, Chris, how the heck did you zoom in? You have all your navigation controls up here at the top. I promise if you just click those, you're going to be able to move in and out on your image. I don't need to go over all of that. I don't think that that would be the best investment of your time today because you can figure these tools out really easily. Um, and then down here at the bottom, you have essentially a film strip where you can start to maneuver through all of your files. And then you get your metadata from your camera or the EXIF data. So that way you know what you're looking at. And so for these images, it was shot at 20,000 ISO. And so just think, this is cleaning up a Sony A7R5 sensor shot at 20,000 ISO. And for those who aren't familiar, the Sony A7 R5 is a 61 megapixel sensor or 60 megapixel sensor, which means there's a lot of information that this is cleaning up and it's doing a really, really good job. And so let's go ahead and jump over to the right of the page here and cover some of the more important aspects of how you get this look that we're or this result that we're getting right here. And so on the top portion, we have a little navigator. As I click and drag to move this around, you can see how this is working. And again, this is just doing a great job at cleaning everything up. All right. But over here on the upper right, you have these three icons. Right now, I have the output settings selected, and we will come back to this after we get done with the render settings, because this is probably the second most important window in PureRAW 6. All right. And so we're going to go ahead and click the top icon here. And this is like the processing workspace. And if I can recommend anything with this particular program is to keep your processing simple and only use the tools just enough to get the image cleaned up to a point where you are satisfied. You don't have to go overboard. All right. Now, inside of this workspace here for the processing, we have our two models essentially of what we're going to be able to apply. And think of this as like uh, denoise software 1 and denoise software 2. Now, in most cases, you're going to want to use DeepPRIME XD3. I find that this gives the best results in my opinion. It does take a little bit more processing power on your computer, but if I go to DeepPRIME 3, you'll notice that it is still doing a phenomenal job, but it's just not quite as good as the DeepPRIME X3. Like you get a little bit more fidelity, and I don't know how well that's going to come through on YouTube. And so let me see, maybe we can zoom in to like 400%. And at this percentage, obviously, we're looking at the individual pixels there, but look at how much noise is over here. And if I go with the DeepPRIME 3, you can see we start to get some of that artifacting come back over here on the right side of the vase. But if I click the DeepPRIME XD3, that just goes away. And so we're really starting to split hairs on how powerful each of these tools are, I guess, rendering the file. And I don't know of anyone who's viewing an image at 400%. I always find it silly even to zoom in to just 100%. But I understand you want to do that so you can make sure that the tool is doing the job. But nonetheless, DeepPRIME 3 and DeepPRIME XD3. Those are your two models that you get to choose from. Version 1, version 2. But 9 times out of 10, I think you're going to find yourself using DeepPRIME XD3 because it is the most powerful and, in my opinion, the most accurate. Underneath that, we have luminance and force details. All right. Now, if you're not familiar with how denoising software works, is the luminance slider is going to be how strong this model that you selected is actually going to start removing noise. In some cases, you may actually want the noise to remain in your image. And so if I pull this down even further, you'll notice I start to bring back some of that noise. And if you're going for like a filmic look and you don't want to get rid of all of the noise, but you just want to get rid of like that color cast of the noise, well, maybe that's the reason you would pull your luminance down to 4. But if you're trying to get the smoothest look in the file as possible, well, the more you increase this, essentially, the less noise you'll see in the overall file. Now, again, as I mentioned before, you don't have to overbake this. I think I had it set to 80 at some point. I don't think this photo even needs it to be at 80. I think that maybe around 56 is doing the trick, 63. Okay. I think that that's given me the look that I need out of this image, and I'm not seeing much of an artifacting issue going on overall. Now, the second one down is forced details. Force details is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to put more details back into the areas that you just processed. And so, depending on what you're going for with the image, maybe you don't need as many details. Like in this photo, I don't really need that much detail. So, I'm going to go ahead and pull back on the force detail. And you'll notice I actually want to zoom in up here to show this because I don't want to look at 800%. We'll go 400. I think that it will be obvious in this area here. And so let me just bring the force details back up. And of course, let's go 300 maybe. Okay. So it's not going to let me show you this, but what I was seeing on my screen in this upper right corner, I was seeing some artifacting. You could actually see it a little bit right here. Hopefully that's coming through on YouTube. I promise there's some artifacting that's going on the image here. But if I pull down on the force detail, that artifacting, it just goes away. It smooths everything out because it's not trying to force all of this extra detail into the file. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. And I don't care what anyone tells you. There is no perfect answer to what right looks like. This is always going to be subjective, and you get to be the person choosing which is the best or the correct amount that you need for the luminance and force details. But just beware, you can overdo your editing, right? In this image, it looks like everything is going to take pretty well overall if I leave this luminance up to 100, but you don't need it at 100. I think 63 gets me a really, really good quality looking image right out of the gate. All right. Or at 63. And then, of course, pulling down the force details for this particular image. Now, the next section is that optical correction. So remember earlier, I had told you that we were pulling in those lens modules or those DxO modules, and that's essentially what's happening right here. And so if I were to turn off all of this stuff, you would see this image. Let me just fit that back to screen. You can see that it got darker up here, and that's because I have some vignetting going on with this lens and the sensor combination. But the first one is going to be lens sharpness optimization. And so this is just going to help your raw files get a little bit more crisp around the edges. And it's also going to give the best optical sharpening to your lens. And that's the reason why these DxO modules are so powerful. Now, the next one is going to be vignetting. And if I turn that on, you can see it just brightens up the corners. Every lens has a standard amount of vignetting that just happens naturally. And again, with these DxO modules, what it's going to do is just give you the best optical opportunity for your files. All right. Vignetting, it's just an on or off button. You get to choose. But I typically like to turn that on. And then in your editing software, you can just darken down the corners using a vignette tool if you want to apply that to your image. Chromatic aberration is going to get rid of fringing around the edges. I don't know if there was much chromatic aberration in this particular file. Typically, you'll see that around bright light sources. Let me see if there's any over here, which I don't think so. Yeah, typically you'll see the chromatic aberration happen around bright light sources when there's a contrasted element in the file, but I'm not seeing anything in this file that's even a thing. But you can turn that on and it just cleans up like green or purple fringing around those edges overall. And then you have lens distortion. And lens distortion, you can see what it's doing there. It's just fixing the barrel distortion that is happening with the lens. It's kind of warped the image just a little bit. And so that's what this is doing. Now, you do have a few options of how much sharpness you want, but this is going to be completely controlled by that DxO module. And if you don't think that the DxO module did a good job, then of course you can come in here and use one of these other settings that you believe would work best for your image. Again, subjective. You get to choose what looks the best for your files. And then the last portion here is retouch. Now, the cool thing about this is if you have dust sensors that you need to get rid of, this is going to automatically find those things and start to remove them. Now, I'll give a little word of caution here. Sometimes it can find things that you didn't actually intend to remove. And so you want to probably use this selectively or sparingly. All right. If you're going to edit inside of a program that allows you to remove dust, my recommendation is to just leave this turned off and remove your dust inside of that program, as opposed to doing it here inside of PureRAW 6, where you'll have a little bit more control in your editing software. That's a personal preference, but just know it is down here. You can turn it on and then you can click and drag the sensitivity to get rid of as much or as little dust as you possibly can. But of course, the best way of getting rid of dust is to keep your sensor clean and to clean it before you take the images, as well as cleaning your lens. I digress. And so that's everything inside of the image correction module. The next one down is going to be the masking module. Now, I'm going to give a 100% disclaimer here. I do not use this portion of DxO PureRAW. Personally, I like to use the global edits and then be done with it. But essentially, what you can do here is mask in different areas where the noise would remain, and then you can mask in areas where you want to remove the noise or reduce the noise. I personally don't use this, and so I'm not going to be the best at showcasing it. If that's something you're really interested in, just leave a comment down below, and I will spend a little bit more time so I can come back more intelligent and familiar with how this particular portion of the software works. But for today, we're going to skip over it. All right. Sorry about that. All right, so now we're going to go over the output settings. And the output settings are very important, especially to get the most out of the programs that you're going to be editing in, or the most out of your image inside of the programs that you're going to be editing in. And so we're going to skip over presets because this is actually just a standard thing that kind of moves along through all of the areas here, with the exception of the mask. And so preset is not a part of the output. It's just present. So don't worry about that. However, the first option is going to be your output format. Now, 9 times out of 10, I think you're going to want to export to DNG because this is going to preserve your files as a raw image. And one of the benefits of having this particular raw editing denoising software is that you can retain your files as a raw image. And so that's to me a no-brainer to leave this as a DNG. You can change it, but I would recommend you leave it as a DNG. And then we have here the options. When you select DNG, you get two options: uncompressed or high fidelity compression. Now, most of the time, I am using the uncompressed option. The reason is I want the best quality that I can out of the image, and then I'll throw away information inside of my editor as opposed to having DxO PureRAW kind of make that decision for me. All right. The other options down here are pretty much standard for an export, but if you want to work with a raster version, and if you're not familiar with what a raw file and a raster file are, essentially the raw file is just a series of data that is representative of an image, whereas a raster file is working in pixels and it is a rendered version that can be read by most software. Whereas a raw file, you're going to need a specific software in order to read those images, all right, or those files. So, nonetheless, if you want to work with a raster file, TIFF and JPEG are available to you. You can turn those on, and you'll notice you can work with multiples. So, if you want to export this to DNG and to JPEG, uh, perhaps maybe you shot JPEG and RAW when you were photographing, well, you can turn on both of those and then it's going to export both of those. And if you really want to go crazy, you can turn on TIFF. And now you have the ability to add in a 16-bit or an 8-bit compressed, whatever you choose to do. I never really deal with that though, because most of the time I'm using a raw workflow. All right. And then, of course, for those who are working inside of Photoshop, you have the ability to create a smart object. I'm not going to worry about that today because I'm not jumping into Photoshop, but you do have that option to create a smart object. Now, it does give you I guess, a storage capacity of how much storage you're going to need. These are going to be relatively larger files. And if you notice, the initial file here is 83 megabytes, right? It's a relatively large file to begin with. And so that's something to keep in mind when you start working with raw files. And but that's also because I shot this on a Sony A7R5. Those are going to be larger files coming out of the camera to begin with, but still something to be aware of. All right. With that being said, after you choose your file type, if you chose one of these raster options, you'll have the ability to turn on DxO Smart Lighting. And you'll notice that the image just overall gets brighter when I turn this on. And as I pull up on the intensity, it just gets a little bit brighter. And this is a really cool tool. I know that DxO Photolab actually has the smart lighting option, and it comes in extremely handy, by the way. But because I like to stay in a raw workflow, I'm not going to export any of these raster files. But if you turn on the JPEG or the TIFF option, you will get the access to the tonal enhancement for the DxO Smart Lighting. Smart Object and DNG, it does not work for that. Then you have your destination. Now, this is actually probably the easier portions to really understand. I personally like to create a subfolder inside of the original folder. Now, if I end up coming back to, let's say, this is a folder when we went to the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C., or Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. If, let's say, I edit these 5 images, well, the next time that I come back, this folder is going to be inside of there where it says Pure Raw Render. It's going to be a folder that says Pure Raw Render. And so instead of choosing original images, I would just click this drop down and then just navigate to that folder. Again, this is just organization techniques. Everyone has their own standard. So if you have a different option or method, then by all means, leave it in the comment section below. But you can determine what is the best way forward for your file structure and organization. And then, of course, you get to rename the file. Now, for me, I usually just go with the default here because I'm not overly concerned of what the raw file is named, because when I go in and edit, I add keywords to my images inside of my photo editor of choice, which is on One Photo Raw. And then when I export, that's where I rename the file to the end, I guess, file name that I want to display. All right. And so I don't really have a preference for this file name, but if you want to change it, you can click this drop down and you have a few different options here. But next to the column here, or the drop down, you have this little pencil tool. And when you click that, you're going to get this dialog box that allows you to just go to town with adding in all kinds of options here. So if you want to add in different types of file names, or maybe you want to add in specified metadata, you can click on the metadata section and then come down here and you can choose things to your heart's content about what you want the file name to be. For me, I think that that's overkill and really not necessary. I am 100% fine with this being the original file name and then DxO DeepPRIME XD3 as the end result for the file name. But again, you choose what makes the most sense for you. Now, because I am not rendering this as a TIFF or a JPEG, I'm not going to get access to the ICC profile, which is just a color space essentially that you get to choose from. I don't really need it because I can select that in a different editing software once I get done with the edit. But if you were to select, let's say, JPEG, then you can come in here and you can choose sRGB or Adobe RGB 1998 for those who are using that color space. Or if you're going to go into DxO software, I recommend that you use DxO Wide Gamut, right? This is going to give you a ton of color space to really push and mold the color in your image. But again, since I'm only focusing on a DNG file output, I'm not going to worry about that. And then the last option here is open an application. Now you get to choose the application that you want to open this file in. For me, I'm going to tell it to do nothing because I don't necessarily need it to open an application. But if you want it to, you can hit this drop down and you can come in here and choose whichever software that you want to go work in next. And so once that's done, and there's also, can't skip over this, export with original raw files. And so for me, since I'm not actually copying over anything, I don't have a need to export with the original raw file because that's going to stay in place. It's going to stay in the original folder. And then the DxO PureRAW rendered file is going to go into this PureRAW render folder. So again, organization does matter, but you get to choose what makes the most sense for you. For me, I usually do nothing after export and I leave this unchecked because I don't need it. And so what I'm going to do is hold down Shift and I'm going to click to add in I'm sorry, I don't need to hold Shift. I'm just going to check the blocks on all of these images. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Process Now. And when you hit Process Now, it brings you back to this light table and it starts to render, as you would imagine, all of your images. You can see the little blue line underneath this image indicating that it's being worked on. And then over here on the right side of each of these other thumbnails, there's a little circle indication like a clock. And that just means that it's in the queue waiting to get processed. And the first one just got processed or got further along. The check mark indicates that that image is done. And so I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this batch process because, it's like watching paint dry. You don't want to do that. But you can do batch editing, and that's essentially what I want to show here. And so when this comes back, we will go and look at these end files. The final images have been rendered, and when it's done, you're going to get this pop-up here that just says, obviously, the processing is done. And that's pretty straightforward and simple. But then down here at the bottom, you get a few options. For me, it says go to Finder. I believe on a PC, it'll say go to Explorer or Files or something of the sort. And then you get the view results, and then you can export to. For me personally, I've never found a need to hit the export to because it's usually the go to Finder that's going to be the best option for me. And so when I click this, it's going to pull up all of those images again inside of that pure raw folder. And so these are my final processed files. And I can just kind of browse through these really easily, and you can see just how much it cleaned these up. Now, of course, this image is really dark. I shot it underexposed, so I would have to clean that up, or like brighten that up, I should say. But ultimately, these images, they look like they were shot at a base ISO, even though I photographed them at 20,000 ISO. And so DxO PureRAW is just one of the best denoising programs on the market today, and you can see the phenomenal results that you get out of this software. Now, of course, if you like to save some money when you are picking up DxO PureRAW 6, you can use the coupon code FWP Summer 26 until July 15th, 2026 to save some money when you check out. This is an affiliate coupon code, which means I make a small commission from everyone who uses it, but that's at no extra cost to you. In fact, you get to save money when you use this coupon code. If that's something you like to do, I greatly appreciate you. And it's also a great way of supporting the channel. So until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.